In this video, I'm going to show you guys my new and improved wheel settings that I use in Forza Horizon 5. With these wheel settings, you're going to be able to drift a lot better, you're going to drive much smoother, the wheel's not going to throw you all over the place, it's not going to wobble back and forth, it's going to be very smooth, feel very realistic. So let's go and jump into the video and I'll show you guys in detail how to set up your wheel to drive like this. My name is Nikolai, and this is Joyshift. I like to film and build cool cars in Forza Horizon 5. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon so you can always be the first one to watch new videos. We're going to learn a whole lot about cars, we're going to customize them, we're going to drive them, and just have a lot of fun with them. Let's go ahead and jump into this video. Previously on my channel, I uploaded a video going over my wheel settings in the game. Now these wheel settings were excellent, they worked very well, but these are going to be a little bit better. So the difference between those old settings and these new ones is the old settings were a little bit more wobbly, you know, they had a little bit more force feedback to them, but these feel a lot more realistic. So there's less wobble, but there is still resistance in the wheel, which is exactly what we want. So if you were to go drive a real car and then you were to go play the game, these wheel settings would feel very similar to what your real car feels like. And now just for reference, my real car is a Toyota 8.6, so it does have a heavier steering wheel, but this steering setup is not going to tire your arms out. It's not going to make it so the force feedback is fighting you. The force feedback is actually going to work with you, and that's exactly what you want, because you don't want to be fighting the wheel. You just want the wheel to work with you. So when you're drifting, you're grip driving, you want the wheel to help guide you through the course. You don't actually want the wheel to be fighting you, because I know a lot of people mentioned in my previous video that the wheel, it just felt a little bit too lightweight, but that's not what you want, because I noticed a lot of people actually liked how light the wheel felt. And if you think about it in terms of a real car, if you go drive a car at, let's say, 60 miles per hour on the highway, you will not feel the wheel throwing you back and forth, and that's just not realistic. In real life, if you were to go drive a car at 60 miles per hour, that wheel will, for the most part, let's say it's a good car, it's got a good alignment on it, that wheel is just going to stay put. It's not really going to move back and forth. You might feel something in the wheel, but it's not going to be so much that if you let go of the wheel, it's just going to wobble back and forth. That's super unrealistic, and I don't like that. So let's just go ahead and jump into these wheel settings. Before we actually go into our wheel settings, we need to head over into difficulty, because in difficulty, we are going to change a few settings that are super important, and I have mine tuned to these difficulty settings. So you need to make sure that at least for the first, when you're first trying this out, you should have these difficulty settings set up here, because this is going to be what I tuned my wheel settings for, so it needs to all balance and match. So first of all, we're going to actually have our braking set to anti-lock on. I like having ABS on, it just makes it easier, and that's really the only assist that I have. Now for steering, I am running simulation. If you have it set to normal steering, it's going to feel a little bit more plush. The car is actually going to have basically a gyro where it'll counter correct for you and counter steer. So if you want it to be a little bit easier on you, you could try normal steering, but I am running simulation because this is the most realistic feeling. This is most what a real car will feel like, and I find that this is giving me the most feedback and the most realistic feedback, because keep in mind, what I'm going for here is a realistic driving experience. Now for traction and stability control, I have both of those off because I don't like those interfering when I try to drift or just grip drive. And then for shifting, I am running manual with clutch. This is all personal preference. You can run automatic, regular manual, or manual with clutch. That has nothing to do with the steering or anything like that. It's basically just whatever transmission you like. That's basically all the settings you'll need for difficulty. The rest you can just adjust for whatever you want. That won't have any effect on the actual steering. Now let's actually go ahead and head over into our steering controls. So if you go right under controls in the menu into advanced controls, you will see you actually have all of your advanced controls for the steering wheel. Now if you go in here and you don't have the same settings as I do, what you probably have set up is your actual controller settings. So in order to get out of this, you need to access the actual steering controls from your steering wheel, and the game will automatically have these controls set up. So if you enter it from your controller, it's going to have the advanced controls for your controller. But if you go in with the steering wheel, it'll of course go in and have your steering controls. So the very first thing we're going to do is set vibration to off. I don't like how this feels. All it does, especially with the G920, all it does is make it feel like it's just, okay, well, it is vibrating, but it just feels like it's cheap. Like it just shakes and it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like an actual vibration you'd feel through a real car steering. So I just have it set off, but if you like it, feel free to go ahead and use it. Invert look, I have that off. Now for steering access dead zone inside and outside, I have those set from 0 to 100 because a real car is going to be 0 to 100. This is going to give us 900 degrees for a simulation steering wheel feeling. This is exactly what we want if we want a realistic feeling. Now, I know a lot of people do tend to like maybe 540. So if you like that, go ahead and set it to 0 to 60. But I like it as realistic as possible, and a realistic car is going to have 0 to 100, which is 900 degrees, and that's exactly what we want. So steering linearity, also I have that set to 50 because a real car is going to be at 50. Now for acceleration, access, dead zone, inside, outside, also 0 to 100. That works for the brake as well, and then for the clutch, because a real pedal goes 0 to 100. You have full control, because the more actual distance you can travel with the pedal, the more control you have. So mid corner, you can actually have more throttle control, more input, less input, exactly what you want. It's just a little bit more fine tuning. So when you're actually driving, you can have more control over the car. This applies to e-brake as well, but I don't actually have an e-brake setup. So mine is just a button on the wheel. But if you do have an e-brake, you can play around with that and see what you like most. For vibration scale, I have it set at 0.5, but I do have vibration set to off. So it doesn't really matter. This setting could be literally anything. And since it's off, it does not matter. But if you do decide to have vibration on, then go ahead and adjust this to whatever you like and whatever is most comfortable with you. Now, here are the important settings. This is what's going to really distinguish the way the wheel feels, and this is what it is going to give you those really nice settings. So first off, force feedback scale, I have that set at 0.8. So at 0.8, it's enough that I feel force, actual force feedback in the wheel, but it's not enough that it wobbles it back and forth. So if you're driving, and let's say you're just driving at, 60 miles per hour, and your wheel is wobbling back and forth if you let go of the wheel, that means your force feedback is set way too high. So I think at 0.8, it's enough that it doesn't wobble back and forth, but you still do feel actual force feedback in the wheel. Now for center spring scale, basically what this is let's say you're drifting and your wheel is rotating. This is actual like the spring rate or the power you feel that for it to actually center. So when it's rotating back, you want it to center, because a real car, if you've ever drifted a real car, what happens is the wheels will self-correct. The car will automatically want to correct to the center. So you want that to happen in the game as well. So basically by having it set to 1.1, it's going to mimic what a real car would do if you were to drift it. Now for wheel damper, I have this set all the way up to 1.8. So the reason I have it so high is because our force feedback is down low. So what this does is by having the force feedback down lower, but the actual wheel damper up at 1.8, which is fairly high, the max you can get is 2. What this does is it allows you to have a very stiff, tight, controllable feeling wheel, but it doesn't actually feel like it's wobbling back and forth. It feels like you still have control. This one is actually all personal preference. So if you feel as if the wheel is too lightweight, actually turn this up to 1.9 or 2.0. But if you do feel as if the wheel is too heavy, you can knock this down a couple notches. It's all personal preference. This is really where you're going to do the most of the adjusting. So if you try these settings out and this wheel feels too tight or too loose, try it out, adjust it, plus or minus 1 or 2, maybe even more, see what you like most, and then go from there, because this is going to be definitely the first reference point, because I'm sure these settings aren't going to work for everyone, right? I don't think everyone is going to be able to use these settings and right off the bat, very first try, they're going to say, oh, these are perfect. I think it's going to work for most people, but people who really want that fine tuning, I say start here, because this is going to be the best place to mess around with and then see what do you like more. Do you want it stiffer, tighter, and then just go from there. Now for the mechanical trail, I have this set to 1.0. Now this one works really good right in the middle, because what the mechanical trail actually does is it sets the aligning torque. Essentially what the setting does is by having it at a larger value, you're going to feel less of the understeer, but having it at a lower value, you're going to feel more of the understeer. So if you feel like you want more understeer, lower the value. If you feel like you want less understeer, raise the value. Force feedback minimum force, I have set to 0.5. Now the reason this is at 0.5, which is the very lowest setting you can go, is because when you're driving normally and you aren't actually going aggressive with the car, you don't want to feel a lot of force feedback. You want it to be very smooth. And what this allows for you to do is have it set that when you're not driving fast, the wheel isn't going to actually give you a lot of force feedback, which is exactly what you want. Because let's say you're just cruising 30, 40 miles per hour in a real car, you're not going to feel anything in the wheel for the most part. If you're on a smooth, flat road and you're just driving in a straight line, your wheel should not be fighting you, especially at such a low speed, because even if you're doing more than that, like 60 miles per hour, if you're just driving straight, you don't want to feel too much, but it's when you start cornering that you want to feel understeer, you want to feel the tires, you want to feel the aligning torque. That's when you want to feel it. So I think having it set to 0.5, what this does is it allows us to have a nicer range. So we can go from the very low setting to what we have, which is 0.8 for the actual force feedback scale. So this gives us more of a range of how much force feedback we can feel. So if we had both of them set to, let's say 0.8 at the exact same value, it would always feel the same, but this allows it so when we're driving normally, we don't feel as much, but when we're driving more aggressive, we will also feel it because our force feedback is set to 0.8. For force feedback load sensitivity, I have that set at 1.2, and then road feel scale is at 0.5, and off-road feel scale is at 0.0. Now these three settings are probably going to be on the very light side, because I think in real life, if you took a car off-roading at 100 miles per hour on a really bumpy dirt road, you would feel a lot in the steering wheel. But this is an arcade game. It's Forza Horizon. We're driving off-road in Lamborghinis and Ferraris, so it doesn't need to be fully realistic all the time. And this is the one, part of this setting guide that is going to be definitely more comfortable rather than actually feeling realistic. Because let's be real, if you're taking a Ford GT off-roading on a rally course and it's a bone stock Ford GT, you're going to destroy that thing in real life. So this kind of doesn't even apply. So I have these settings very low because when I go off-road, I don't want to feel my wheel throwing me all over the place. If you had this set any higher than these settings, it's just going to be really uncontrollable. So it's really nice for rally driving because the wheel isn't throwing you all over the place, but it is still controllable. It doesn't feel much, I use that kind of relatively because it does still feel different off-road versus on-road, of course, but it doesn't make it so it's like on-road is controllable, but then you go off-road and it's like totally uncontrollable. Both are still very controllable, and this is just kind of what I found to work for me. So let me know, what do you guys think of these settings? Because everyone's different, right? Some people want a different feeling wheel, but these are what work for me. These are what I find to enjoy the most when I'm driving, and these also match most closely to what I want in a realistic feeling steering wheel, minus those off-road feels. So I think this is definitely a good setup guide for you guys. Try it out. Let me know, what do you guys think in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy this video and want to see many more just like it, I have a few other helpful guides on the channel, so definitely do check those out. But other than that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.